Look, you're not lazy, you're not unmotivated, and you're definitely not broken. You're just scared. And no one ever taught you how to handle that fear, especially when it showed up dressed like logic. Because fear doesn't always scream run. Sometimes it whispers things like, let's scroll Zillow a little longer. Let's watch a few more hours of YouTube. And if that sounds familiar, I want you to think about this. Fear freezes, but freedom flows. Maybe you're sitting on a deal right now and you've done the math. You've toured the property or you even like the area, but something is keeping you stuck. It's not the numbers, it's not the roof, it's not the interest rate, it's fear. That quiet, subtle, paralyzing voice that says, what if I mess this up? What if I lose everything? What if I look like an idiot? Now look, I've been there. Frozen, overthinking, wasting time in the name of getting ready. But the truth is, you don't need to kill fear to move forward. You just need to learn how to bounce through it. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you how. Now let's talk about what fear actually looks like. Because it's not always screaming, don't do it. More often, it's quiet, reasonable. It hides behind phrases like, something feels off. Let's play it safe. I just need a little more time to think it through. And I've learned that the hard way. I had a 14-unit property under contract. Everything looked good on paper. Cash flow was solid. Rents were under market. And it felt like the kind of deal that could change a lot of things for me. Then during the due diligence, one of the units had a grease fire in the kitchen. It wasn't a complete catastrophe, but here's the part that messed with me. The seller didn't tell me. I had to find out from a contractor who showed up late to the site. And that was it. My confidence had completely evaporated. It didn't matter that the numbers still worked. It didn't matter that insurance covered the damage. That one moment made me question everything. So I walked. And about a year later, I ran into someone who had bought that exact same property. And guess what? He doubled his money. He fixed up the units, he raised the rents, and he refinanced. He walked away with a massive return on my missed opportunity. Now look, I'm not saying that I should have ignored the red flags, but I didn't walk because of the fire. I walked because I got scared. Scared of what else I might not know. Scared that I couldn't recover if things went sideways. Scared that I wasn't ready to actually handle the deal. Now, that's what fear does. It pokes holes in your confidence and it plants doubt. It makes you second guess what you already knew was right. And by the time you sort it all out, someone else is cashing in the check that you should have earned. So if you're sitting on the sidelines right now, or if you are overanalyzing or waiting for that perfect deal, you've got to ask yourself this. Is this actually a due diligence problem? Or is it fear taken disguise? So what do you got to do with fear? Because here is the uncomfortable truth. Fear doesn't go away. Not in your first deal, not in your 10th deal. You just have to learn how to move anyway. To act through it. To bounce, even if your knees are shaking. The people who succeed in multifamily investing, they're not fearless. They're just faster at acting than fear is at stopping them. And here's what I've learned. Confidence isn't something that you have before you start. It's something that you earn by starting. You don't wait for the fear to disappear. You take a step and then another until the fear has to catch up to you. So let's get real. Fear isn't going to go away. So how do we move anyway? How do we build wealth, create that freedom, and take action when fear is still sitting in the passenger seat? Because the truth is, freedom doesn't show up when you finally feel ready. It shows up when you act, even when you don't. I had to learn that the hard way. And the people who you admire in this space, they're not fearless. They've just gotten used to moving through the fear faster than it can freeze them. So how do you start doing the same? It's going to begin with these 3 key mindset shifts that changed the game for me. Number 1, perfection to progress. This right here is where most people stay stuck. They wait until everything feels locked in, until every risk is accounted for, until they're absolutely sure they won't mess up. But most successful investors that I know, they move when they're mostly sure, when the numbers make sense and the upside is there and the deal fits the box. They act. Not because they're careless, but because they know something important. You can't think your way into certainty. You have to move to get the clarity. Now, I used to stare at spreadsheets like my life depended on them, rerunning those same analysis until I couldn't tell if the numbers were real or just a bunch of noise. Refreshing those rent comps at 2 a.m., hoping that something was going to magically change, and second guessing myself so hard that I started questioning every decision that I ever made. But let's be honest, most of that wasn't research. It was just me trying to avoid making a decision. All it did was stall progress and let these opportunities pass me by. Today, I focus on getting enough clarity to take the next step, because you don't need to see the whole staircase. You just need to see the next step. Number 2, from outcome to action. We all want the result, that first check, the refinance, the win. But here's the thing. Focusing only on the outcome is going to create a lot of pressure. And pressure paralyzes your action. When you are constantly thinking, when do I finally close? Or how fast can I scale? You end up doing nothing at all. But when you focus on action, everything shifts. Run 5 deals this week. Call 2 brokers. Tour 1 property. Make 1 awkward call that you've been avoiding. Do that and watch how your confidence builds. Because you don't become an investor by thinking about deals. You become one by touching deals, by moving. Confidence doesn't come before the action. It builds through the action. And number 3, from isolation to community. This one might be the most important. Fear grows in silence, in isolation. It thrives when you're sitting alone, rereading your notes, scrolling social media, convincing yourself that everyone else is ahead of you. But something changes the moment that you get around people who are actually moving. People who are submitting offers, making mistakes, figuring it out loud. I remember sitting down with a few other investors. One had just closed their first 10 unit, another was stuck in a nightmare rehab, and one guy had just backed out of a deal and was wrestling with it. No gurus, no pitch decks, just people in the arena. And it hit me. They weren't fearless. They were just doing it anyway. And the more we shared, the smaller my own fear started to feel. Because when you see other people taking action despite their doubt, you realize you're not the only one feeling uncertain. You don't need to be the bravest person in the room. You just need to be around the people who are still moving. And that's the shift. You don't wait for the fear to go away. You just take the next step and let fear catch up if it can. Freedom doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes from doing the next right thing. Even if your voice shakes, and even if your numbers aren't perfect, and even if your knees are knocking the whole way through that first property tour, because progress is what builds power, and action is what creates freedom. Now let's talk about what happens once you actually start moving. Because there's a moment after you take that first scary step where something inside you shifts. Your brain stops screaming, your shoulders drop, and for the first time, you realize, I didn't die. That's the moment when you stop thinking like a spectator and start moving like an investor. The first win is everything. It's not the size of the win that matters. It's the fact that you moved. I don't care if it's a 4-unit deal, calling the seller for the first time, or walking into a building with a notepad and 100 questions, because it all counts. Because that one move creates proof. Proof that you're not stuck. Proof that you can figure things out, and proof that fear isn't in control anymore. You are. That one win becomes the spark. And from there, everything starts to change. Now, how does momentum compound? Momentum isn't magic. It's movement that compounds. You take action, you build trust, you get noticed, you get opportunities. And after walking away from that 14-unit deal, I felt like I had blown it. But I forced myself to stay in motion. I kept underwriting deals. No pressure to close, just the reps. Then I toured a rundown triplex. It was nothing glamorous, a rough property in a rough area with rough numbers to match, but I showed up. I walked the property. I had a real conversation with the broker, asked the questions, even though I wasn't confident in asking, and that's when everything started to shift. And guess what? That same broker, he called me back a few weeks later with something completely different. And here's what he said. I've got a 50-unit mobile home park that's off market. You want a shot at it? Now let that sink in. A beat-up triplex straight to a 50-unit mobile home park. All because I took the meeting, all because I stayed in the game. That is the power of momentum. You don't always see the connection in real time, but every step you take is building a path to something bigger. Now, people think the shift comes from some huge moment. The perfect deal, the payday, the portfolio milestone. But the truth, the real breakthrough happens when you refuse to sit down. It happens when you take a meeting that doesn't look life-changing, but leads to one that is. It's that awkward first call, the gritty first walkthrough, the broker meeting you almost skipped. Every one of those moments chips away at fear and builds a base of action that fear can't compete with. Now, why does confidence follow action? Confidence doesn't come first, not in real estate and not in life. It's built after consistent action, after the reps, after you prove to yourself that you're the kind of person who keeps moving, even when it's uncomfortable. You get it when you make the call, tour that ugly property, submit the offer that scares you, follow up one more time when you want to quit, and that's the bounce mindset. Not because everything goes your way, but because you go forward either way. Momentum creates courage. Courage creates the results. And the results, guess what? They create belief. Failure then becomes your fuel. And that's the part that no one tells you. Once you start moving, even your setbacks start working for you. That 14-unit deal I walked away from, it wasn't a failure. It was a trigger, a wake-up call, and it showed me what hesitation costs. And it forced me to make a decision. Stay stuck or bounce forward. And that bounce led to a broker relationship, and that broker led to a triplex, and that triplex led to a 50-unit mobile home park. That's how the game works. Every rep, every showing matters. Every question you're willing to ask matters. You just have to keep stacking those steps. So here's what I want you to take from this. You don't have to land a home run to win. You just have to swing. Tour the triplex. Call the broker. Underwrite the deal. Even if it leads nowhere. It's taking you somewhere. Because the path to the 50-unit deal often starts in the rundown triplex that you almost didn't see. And the longer you wait for that perfect moment, the more likely you are to miss the moment that opens the doors to everything. So here's your challenge. Not for the next month, not for when you feel ready. This week, take one step, just one. Call a broker, run an underwriting, walk a property, send that message you've been sitting on. It doesn't have to be big. It just has to be real. Write down what fear is saying to you right now. Seriously, put it on paper. Let the voice in your head have the mic, and then prove it wrong. You don't need to eliminate fear. You just need to act faster than it can catch you. Because here's the truth. You're not behind. You're not too late. You're just one bounce away. And that next move you make, it might be the triplex that leads to that 50 unit. But you're never going to know if you don't take that action.